For the month of August, I'm replaying the most downloaded podcasts of the past year. Not surprisingly, the first two rebroadcasts were about debt, and so is this one. Originally broadcast back in January, on this podcast, Ted Michaelis and I answer the question, which debts should you pay first? Should you knock off the small ones first, or go for the high interest rate ones first? Does it matter if the debts are secured, like a car loan or mortgage, or unsecured, like a credit card? This is a short podcast, less than 18 minutes, but that's all Ted and I needed. I have a strong opinion on this topic, which I addressed both in chapter 18 and 19 of my book, and Ted also has no shortage of opinions, so here's a rebroadcast where we answer the question, what debts should you pay first?
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Last week here on Debt Free in 30, Ted Michaelis and I gave our predictions for 2018. We predicted that Canadians' debt levels will continue to increase, but more importantly, if interest rates continue to rise, and we think they will, it will cost a lot more to service your debt. That's the key point. Let me shock you with this statement. Debt levels don't matter. Owing $1 million isn't a big problem if you earn $10 million a year. If you only earn $10,000 a year, owing $1 million is a big problem because you can't service the debt. It's not the level of debt that matters, it's whether or not you can service it. On last week's show, we gave the example of someone with a $500,000 mortgage with a 25-year amortization. If the interest rate goes from 3.29% to 4.29%, which is only 1 point, the monthly payment goes from about $2,400 to just over $2,700 a month. That may not sound like a lot, but that's about an 11% increase. Let me say that again. What the economists call a 100 basis point increase in interest rates, or what we normal people think of as a 1% increase, is actually an 11% increase in the example I just used. Can you afford an 11% increase in your mortgage payments? Do you think your pay will go up by 11% this year? That's why interest rates are so important and why you should focus on debt service costs and not just the total amount of debt. So if you have a mortgage, should you try to pay it off? What about your other debts? It's the start of a new year, so which debts should you pay off first? That's the question we didn't have time to answer last week, so Ted Michaelis has returned today to help me answer that question. Ted, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, what debt should you pay first? How do you decide? What's the thought process?
Well, let's make this a quick show. I think in September, an excellent book was released to the public. Money Myths, or maybe you can correct me on the title.
Straight talk on your money, yes.
And myth number 8 was all about this particular subject. Who was the author of that book, Doug?
I can't remember. But it sounds like a great book. And yes, you're right. In fact, and I believe myth number 19 touched on it too.
That's exactly right.
So you're right. So let's go through then kind of the thought process. So the conventional wisdom, you're right, the whole point of the book was there's two different kinds of ways of looking at it. One side of it is pay your lower interest debts first, and the other side is no, pay the small ones first because you're going to psychologically feel better. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm going to take us in another direction slowly. I think more important than this is to make sure you're not accumulating any more debt. So you're working on the assumption that I've got money to pay down my debt. I want to make sure everybody understands that if you're still accumulating debt, then what we're talking about today isn't the solution you're looking for. We need to talk about something else. Sorry about that.
So no, that's a valid point because we often meet with people and they're complaining about I can't pay my debt, I can't service my debt, but they're continuing to pile on more debt.
Right. So you can't solve the one problem without the other. But what we want to talk about today is which debt should you pay off first. All right. So I'm an accountant. I think you pay off the most expensive debt, which is the debt with the highest interest rate. And that was one of the options that you gave. The reasoning for that is you get the most bang for your buck. If you owe somebody $1,000 at 30% interest or somebody $1,000 at 10% interest, paying down the 30% interest debt will save you money in the long run. And the quicker you pay that one off, the more money you can direct to the lower interest debts. You'll get further ahead more quickly.
It's math.
Right. It's simple math. But again, we're accountants. And I get the other side of this.
Yeah, and the other side is, I've got a $10,000 credit card that has a 20% interest, but I got this $200 cell phone bill from 6 months ago. Maybe the interest isn't even accumulating anymore.
Right.
But it's $200. So what's the thought process for why you should think about paying that $200 off first?
Well, so not everybody thinks of this in pure dollars and cents. Some people think of this as a project that I got to get done. There's There's a list of all these debts I got to deal with. I got to make that pile smaller. And so one of the ways to make that smaller is to pay off some of them very quickly. Well, you can't pay off that $10,000 credit card at 20%, but you could pay off that $200 phone bill. Now it's off your pile. You've achieved a goal. The mountain is smaller. You feel like you've done something. And I get that. If your brain works that way, you need those kind of little rewards, then that system will work. Just be disciplined enough to make sure you go through the whole pile.
Yeah, and so if it's something you can pay off in a month or two, okay, fine. If it's something that's going to take you a year to pay off and you've got another debt that it's a much higher interest rate, well, maybe then the psychology isn't quite the same.
And this will drive some of you for a loop. Let's say you've got a line of credit at 7% and a bunch of credit cards, and you still have room in your line of credit to accumulate some more debt. It might make sense to max out the line of credit to pay off those other debts. Simply because it's a lower rate of interest. Then you're achieving both goals. You're paying off high interest debt first, and you're reducing the total amount that you got to pay every month. I know it sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah, and as a general rule, we obviously don't recommend more debt. That would only make sense if you then go and cancel that first credit card.
That's the critical point. So if you're going to reduce your total amount of debt, you also have to reduce your total access to credit once you've paid the debt down. And that's what people forget to do.
Yeah, and that's why debt consolidation gets people into a lot of trouble because, okay, I've got these high-interest credit cards. I get a line of credit at a lower rate, so my costs are down, but I've still got the credit cards. Yeah. I rack them up again, and I got a huge problem.
At least once a week, I talk to somebody that's done exactly that. So they did the right thing. They used their line of credit or a loan to pay down all of their high-interest debts, but they didn't cancel the credit cards. So they went out and they ran them up again. Instead of being ahead of the game, 6 months later, they've doubled what they owe. It's just a bad strategy unless you do everything you're required to do.
Yeah, it's very risky. And even if you call the bank and say, look, I want you to reduce my credit limit on my credit card to $1,000 so it's for emergencies and nothing else, there's always credit limit creep where they just raise it anyways without your knowledge. So I think we both agree that as a general rule, we're accountants, follow the math, pay the high interest rate debts first, but we understand the psychology of it. If you've got a small debt that you want to just want to deal with, and that's fine too. You can certainly cut it off. You can pay it off. If you can do it in a short period of time, a month or two, psychologically, one less thing on your pile. Right. Okay, now, what about a callable debt?
Okay, so people may not understand what that is, but a callable debt is one that they can call you and say it's got to be paid now. They're also called demand loans.
So what would be an example of that in real life?
Most lines of credit are callable debts. They're demand loans that they can contact you and say you got to pay this thing off in full.
So I've got two different debts then, and let's say, I mean, we in the first example, we talked about different interest rates. Let's assume we got the same interest rate, a $10,000 credit card and a $10,000 line of credit, which is a callable or a demand type loan. And it's kind of a silly example because the interest rates probably aren't going to be the same. But if they were, which one should I prioritize?
Well, so the one that you are greatest at risk is the callable debt, because they could contact you at any time and say, you know what, I need this thing paid off in full. So given the example you just gave us, if the interest rates were the same, I guess you pay down the callable debt first.
And even if they don't call the loan, they can change the interest rate on you.
Exactly right. But they do that with credit cards now, too. I mean, the whole system is rigged against people. But that's a different show.
It's better to not have debt, I guess, is the answer. So, okay, we talked about the interest rate differential. We talked about whether it's callable or not. What about if it's a secured debt? So, again, I've got a $10,000 car loan, and I've got a $10,000 line of credit that's unsecured. And, again, let's just assume they have roughly the same interest rates. Would there be any reason to prioritize one over the other?
Well, so let's assume you want to keep your car. You can only make one payment, either the car or the callable debt, or it doesn't matter what the other debt is. The only way to keep the car is to continue to make the payments. So the decision you're making is, what's the priority? Is the priority that I got to keep the car, or is the priority that I got to reduce the debt? If you don't make the car payment, they have the right to come and repossess it. You haven't got the car, and then they're going to take legal action against you. If you don't make the credit card or the line of credit payment, they have the right to take legal action against you. So it's a bad situation either way, but if your priority is to keep the car, you got to pay for the car.
And therefore, I guess in that scenario, well, you may actually decide, I'm going to pay the car loan down quicker. And again, we're giving some pretty hypothetical examples because most car loans, there's a set payment. You can't there's no privilege to go and pay it quicker unless there's some kind of penalty. So,
and most of them have built in some kind of promotion where you're not paying market rates anyway. So car companies are pretty desperate to sell cars. They give you what look like good deals, but
yeah,
that's another show too.
You've paid more for the car to begin with, but then they give you a deal on the car. So, so I guess really what we're saying is you got to think it through.
Yeah, the best thing to do would be to get a sheet of paper and take an inventory of exactly what debts you have, what the interest rates are on them, what the monthly payments are. And that way you can figure out which one of these is the most expensive, which one of them has the smallest balance I could pay off the quickest. What's important to you to get you through this project, which is reduce your total debt level.
And then the risk element to it. Okay, I'm really afraid of losing my car. Okay, and then I guess maybe that's something that gets prioritized. So so there you have it, a shorter episode for you today where we answered one simple question, which debts should you pay first? Now,
you really should get the book, though.
It's a great book. What's it called again? Oh, yeah, Straight Talk
yes,
on Your Money. That's it. And yes, we do talk about this in the book. Now, again, Ted and I are accountants, so we like to follow the math, which says pay your highest interest rate debts first. If you have two credit cards and one has a 20% interest rate and the other is 10%, allocate all of your extra money to the 20% one first, because that way you'll save the most in interest payments. And of course, you're still making your minimum payments on all the other ones as well.
Right.
However, we also understand that psychologically, if you owe $100 on one debt, even if it has a low interest rate, it may make you feel better to be able to cross that one debt off your list. So fine, go ahead, pay it off if it'll make you feel better. It's a small amount, so the interest savings aren't a big factor. We also think you should look at which debts are callable. If you have a 5-year car loan, as long as you make your payments, the lender can't demand full repayment early. But if you have a callable loan, like a line of credit, or as Ted called it, a demand loan, the lender may say, hey, we want our money now, pay up, and then you got a problem. And of course, a variable rate debt, like a line of credit, allows the lender to increase your interest rate anytime. So there's also a risk, so that you may want to reduce your risk by paying down your callable loans, even if the interest rate is higher than on your non-callable debts. Finally, we discussed secured loans. If you don't pay your car loan, they can take your car. So again, if this is a big risk for you, paying off secured loans first may make sense. Of course, secured loans generally carry the lowest interest rate, so for most people, we recommend paying off secured loans last, not first. But now that you know the thought process, you can make your own decisions. So, Ted, final question for you, and you kind of hit on it at the beginning, that you got to, obviously start reducing your debt before worrying about, or you got to stop accumulating new debt.
Stop accumulating new debt first, and then
before you start paying things off. Now, okay, what if I'm in a situation though where I've got so much debt that it's mathematically not possible to do it? I mean, our average client has around $50,000 of unsecured debt. So we're not talking car loans and mortgages. We're talking everything else. And even if they do the math and go, well, okay, I'm going to pay my highest interest rate one off first, but it's going to cost me $3,000 a month to be servicing all this debt and actually paying it off. What do you do then?
Okay. Well, so when you realize that you're in deeper than you can find the way out, you need to find somebody to help you. I think, and I'm biased because I'm one of these, but a licensed insolvency trustee is the place to start. You could get an appointment with your loans officer or somebody at the bank. Be careful. They're going to try and sell you a new product. The newspapers are full of ads for people that, they call themselves debt consultants, that will tell you they can help you get out of debt. The truth is, you want to talk to the only professionals licensed in Canada to do this kind of work. And we're obliged to tell you all your solutions, not just the ones that we provide.
Yeah, because that's the law. And again, we have no objection. In fact, we encourage you to talk to your banker. Maybe they can lower the interest rate. But number one, make sure that actually does you some good.
Right.
Lowering your payments from $2,000 a month to $1,800 a month when you could only afford $1,000 a month
doesn't solve the problem.
So understand what the options are, but don't be signing anything until you've fully explored all of the different options.
Correct.
And so when they come in to see us, the common things that we're going to be able to help them with are a personal bankruptcy or a consumer proposal.
Yeah, those are the legal solutions that we're licensed to do. But we all talk to people about debt consolidation loans and just revising their budget so that they can stop accumulating new debt and reduce the debt that they have. I mean, only about half the people that talk to us actually end up filing. We're able to help those other folks because they come to see us soon enough. The biggest mistake people make is that they avoid the problem, and problems don't go away. They come to us when it's too late. Their options are much less are much more limited.
Yeah, come in quickly. And so just in round numbers then, so that person who owes $50,000, $60,000 worth of unsecured debt, credit cards, bank loans, income taxes, payday loans, that sort of thing, what kind of proposal would they end up making? And obviously it's different in all cases. It depends on income. It depends on your assets. But what's a typical one?
Yeah, a typical solution is to repay about a third of what you owe. So on $50,000, you're looking at $15,000, $17,000. So $15,000 would be $250 a month over 5 years. There's no new interest charges. You're paying down the $15,000, so you are eliminating all of the debt.
And so it's pretty simple math. If I paid everything on my own, even if I did all the things we discussed, paying the high interest rates first and everything, to pay off $50,000 on your own is going to cost, well, even if the interest is zero, it's going to cost $50,000.
Right.
And with typical interest rates, obviously you're going to be paying a lot more than that.
Yeah, I mean, your guess of somewhere around $1,500 a month on $50,000 is accurate. That's a safe bet. That's what your minimum payments would add up to. So you compare that to $250 payment. I mean, this is not complicated math.
Now, that sounds too good to be true, though.
Well, but remember, what the proposal is an alternative to filing bankruptcy. And there are times when bankruptcy makes more sense. It could be, why would you agree to pay back $15,000 if you got nothing? I know that minimum wages just went up a couple of days ago, but it's still not going to be enough for people to pay off $50,000 worth of debt. That's just not going to happen.
And so the negative implications of filing the consumer proposal are what?
Well, so it's going to have an impact on your credit report, but keep in mind, if no one will approve you for new credit, your credit report's already looking pretty bad. Well, we should probably do another show on credit reports because I think people are getting duped on these things.
Well, we can add that to the list for 2018.
But that's another topic.
But yeah, you're right. If you file a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, it shows that you filed, and so therefore that is less good than if you paid everything in full. But
but it isn't any worse than if somebody has you in collections or if they take you to court. I mean, the myth that people don't seem to understand, I'm pretty sure this was in the book, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
That
which book is that you're talking about?
That your credit report is important, but it is not the end-all and be-all of all things. If you can't access any new credit, then regardless what you think your credit score is or how good your credit report looks, you've got bad credit. I mean, that's just the truth.
Yeah, and so you said it. If you can't borrow the money at favorable rates, then your credit's already shot. So you're much better off, rather than struggling with wage garnishments and asset seizures and all the rest of it, trying to pay back the mountain of debt you've got. Do something that, like a consumer proposal, that's going to clear up the situation.
That's right. It's the start of a new year. Give yourself a fresh start. If you are struggling with more debt than you can handle, talk to some professional that can at least give you options of how to deal with it.
Well, and I think that's a great way to end it. The simple way to contact us is through our website at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Phone numbers for all of our different locations are there. Ted, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
That's our show for today. A full transcript of today's show can be found at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. And we've got links to consumer proposals if you want more information, and then obviously how to contact any one of our offices, including how to reach Ted and I. Thanks for listening. Until next week, for Ted Michaelis, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.